The first time Ethan noticed Lyra, she seemed almost like a shadow drifting through the crowd. She was new, a transfer into the Galactic Academy of Unity, where dozens of species gathered to study science, history, diplomacy, and combat training under the dream of harmony. Yet harmony was a fragile thing, and Lyra's presence made the cracks visible. She was small, barely 4.5 feet tall, with hair that fell like liquid silver and eyes that looked like oceans filled with starlight. Her skin shimmered faintly under the artificial sun lamps, as if she carried pieces of her lost world with her. She clutched her data slate close to her chest as though it was both a shield and her anchor. From the very beginning, Ethan knew she wasn't human. Not entirely. It should not have mattered. The Academy was supposed to be the future of Unity. But teenagers did not live by ideals. They lived by instinct, and instinct turned difference into weakness. On her very first day, the whispers began. By the time she sat down to eat in the cafeteria, the whispers had turned into laughter. Ethan had been at his usual table, poking at a dull protein loaf when the sound cut through the chatter. Roa, a broad-shouldered human from the Martian colonies, had swaggered up to her table, eyes already gleaming with mischief. "Hey, Star Bug," he said, snatching her data slate from her hands. "What's this? Scribbles? Or do you write in bug language too?" His friends laughed, echoing his cruelty like a choir of jackals. Lyra's cheeks flushed violet, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Please, give it back." "Say that louder, Star Bug, I didn't hear you." Roa leaned in, sneering, his voice dripping with malice. The laughter spread across the cafeteria, students turning to watch. Some shifted uncomfortably, but none stepped in. It was safer to look away. That was the rule. Ethan felt something ignite in his chest. He had seen it before, 100 times. Someone different, someone small, turned into prey. Most of the time, he kept his head down. But Lyra's trembling hands, her small voice, her stubborn attempt to meet Roa's eyes, something about it broke through his walls. He stood without realizing, his voice steady but sharp. "Leave the girl alone." The words silenced the room. Dozens of eyes turned to him. Roa raised an eyebrow, mocking. "What's that, Ethan? You sticking up for her?" "Yeah," Ethan said, fists clenched at his side. "I am." It wasn't the first time he had clashed with Roa, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But that moment drew a line in the sand. The following days were filled with cruel games. Lyra was shoved in corridors, mocked for her accent, taunted with names, glowworm, doll, bug. And every time, Ethan was there. Sometimes he fought with words, sometimes with fists, always with the quiet rage of someone who could not stand injustice. Slowly, Lyra began sitting at his table. She rarely ate, nibbling at the tasteless nutrient paste like a bird, but she always thanked him. Her galaxy eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand why a human would bother. One evening, after another long day of insults, she whispered, "You shouldn't protect me. It will make you a target too." "Too late for that," Ethan said with a half-smile. "Besides, I don't like bullies." Lyra tilted her head, her silver hair glinting in the dorm lights. "On my world, those who defend others are chosen as guardians. It is an honor, but it is dangerous. Somebody's got to do it." He shrugged. For the first time, she smiled. A real one. Small and shy, but bright enough to melt through the cold walls Ethan had built around himself. But the bullying escalated. One night, as Ethan walked Lyra back from the library, they found her dorm vandalized. Her door was smeared with glowing slays, her belongings scattered across the corridor. Hidden voices laughed in the shadows, their cruelty echoing through the empty hall. Lyra froze, trembling, tears filling her shimmering eyes. Something inside Ethan snapped. He stormed down the hall until he found Roa and his friends lounging near the rec hall. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He just charged. The fight was brutal. Ethan's fists landed hard, his anger carrying him through. But they were bigger, stronger, more numerous. By the time security dragged them apart, his lip was split, his ribs screaming, his eyes swollen nearly shut. Still, he didn't regret it. Not for a second. That night, as he struggled with the pain, there came a soft knock on his door. Lyra slipped inside, carrying a small orb glowing faintly. She pressed it to his side, whispering, "Hold still." Warmth spread through him, soothing the ache like sunlight melting ice. Within minutes, the pain dulled. What was that? Ethan breathed. It is a gift of my people, she said softly. Healing light. But forbidden here. They fear what they do not understand. Her gaze lowered. I am the last of my kind. My planet destroyed in war. I was sent here as envoy, but humans. Her voice cracked. They only see weakness. For the first time, Ethan understood her loneliness. She wasn't just a tiny alien girl. She was the last flame of a vanished world. Not all humans, Ethan said quietly. You've got me. Her eyes lifted, shimmering with something unspoken. Gratitude, hope, trust. And in that moment, Ethan knew one thing. He would never let her stand alone again. The bullying did not stop. If anything, it grew worse. Roa and his friends wanted to break Lyra, to show her she did not belong in the academy. One night, Ethan walked her back from the library. When they reached her dorm, Lyra froze. Her door was covered in glowing paint, marked with cruel slurs. Her belongings were thrown out into the corridor, scattered like trash. From the shadows, unseen voices laughed and faded away. Lyra stood still, her small body trembling. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Ethan felt his anger explode. He stormed down the corridor, searching until he found Roa and his group lounging near the rec hall, proud of their cruelty. Ethan did not think. He charged. The fight was fast and brutal. He managed to land a few strong hits, but they were larger, more numerous. They knocked him down, fists and boots raining blows. By the time security pulled them apart, Ethan's lip was split, one eye swollen, and his ribs screamed with every breath. But he did not regret it. He had made his choice. That night, when the pain kept him awake, there came a soft knock at his door. Lyra slipped inside, holding a small glowing orb. Hold still, she whispered. She pressed it against his ribs. Warmth spread through his body, chasing away the pain. Within minutes, the swelling faded, the ache dulled, and his breathing eased. Ethan stared in awe. What was that? Lyra lowered her eyes. It is the gift of my people. Healing light. But it is forbidden to use openly here. Humans fear what they do not understand. She hesitated, her voice cracking. I am the last of my kind. My planet was destroyed in war. They sent me here to learn, to share knowledge. But humans, they see only weakness. For the first time, Ethan truly understood her loneliness. She was not just a fragile alien girl in a strange school. She was the last flame of a world already gone. Not all humans, Ethan said softly. You've got me. Her galaxy eyes lifted to his, shimmering with gratitude, maybe even trust. And in that quiet moment, a bond formed stronger than any law of the academy. The tension reached its peak weeks later, during combat simulation class. Every student had to enter the virtual arena to test reflexes and teamwork. That day, Lyra was paired against Roa. Everyone knew it was deliberate. The instructor looked away, pretending not to notice. Inside the shimmering simulation field, Roa grinned like a predator. Finally, time to crush the bug. Lyra activated her light spear, but her hand shook. Roa charged like a bull, his strikes hard and heavy. She tried to block, but each blow rattled her small frame. The crowd jeered. She stumbled, fell to the floor, her weapon flickering out. Finish her, someone shouted. Roa raised his blade high for the final strike. In that moment, Ethan could not sit still. He vaulted over the barrier, slamming into Roa before the blade could fall. The arena alarms blared, the system glitching as it tried to register two fighters where only one should be. Get up! Ethan barked at Lyra, shielding her with his body. The crowd gasped, instructors shouted, but he saw only Roa's furious sneer and Lyra's wide, tear-filled eyes. Leave her alone. Ethan growled. The fallout was heavy. Ethan was dragged before the Academy Council, accused of breaking rules, of reckless behavior, of endangering protocol. They spoke of suspension, even expulsion. Then, something unexpected happened. Lyra stepped forward. For the first time, her voice rose before the council. Her words trembled, but her eyes shone bright. He saved my life. Again and again. When others mocked, when others hurt, he stood. He is what your academy claims to teach. Unity, courage, honor. If you punish him, you prove the bullies right. You prove I do not belong. The chamber fell silent. The council, bound by its own ideals, had no choice. Roa and his crew were disciplined, though not as much as they deserved. Ethan was placed on probation, watched carefully. But none of that mattered, because when they left the chamber, Lyra looked at him with a real smile, brighter than any star. On my world, she whispered, when someone protects you with their life, they are no longer a stranger. They are chosen family. Ethan felt the words strike deep. This was no longer about a bullied alien girl and a reckless human boy. It was about something greater, standing against cruelty, building bonds across the stars. Sometimes the smallest voices carried the greatest strength, and sometimes all it took was one human to say, "Leave the girl alone," and truly mean it. Weeks passed, but the bullying did not stop. It only changed. Roa and his friends grew bolder, testing limits. They wanted Lyra to break. They wanted Ethan to regret standing up. And one day, during combat simulation class, they found their chance. The students stood inside the wide simulation chamber, their suits glowing faintly under the program's lights. Everyone had to spar against different opponents. The goal was to test skill, teamwork, and discipline. But when the match list appeared, Ethan felt his stomach twist. Lyra was paired against Roa. It was no accident. The instructor looked the other way, pretending not to notice. Some students smirked, waiting for the show. Roa grinned as he entered the arena. His combat spear glowed, heavy and sharp with simulated energy. "Finally," he said, his voice loud, carrying to the watching crowd. "Time to squash the bug." Lyra's hands shook as she lifted her light spear, a thin weapon glowing faintly. Her stance was unsure, her small frame trembling. Still, she tried. The match began. Roa charged like a bull, his strikes heavy. Each blow rattled Lyra's arms. She tried to block, but she was too small, too fragile. The crowd jeered, shouting for Roa to finish it. Lyra stumbled, falling hard on the arena floor. Roa raised his spear high, ready for the final strike. Something inside Ethan snapped. He didn't think. He vaulted over the barrier, crashing into the simulation field. The system screamed with alarms, confused by two fighters where there should be one. Ethan threw himself between Roa and Lyra, blocking the strike with his own body. Gasps filled the room. Instructors shouted, but Ethan did not care. He stood firm, glaring at Roa. "Leave her alone." His voice echoed across the arena. Lyra stared at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. For the first time, she saw someone willing to take the blow for her. The match ended in chaos. The instructors dragged Ethan out. He was taken before the Academy Council. They accused him of breaking rules, of interfering, of endangering the program. Some wanted him suspended. Others wanted him expelled. Ethan stood silent, jaw clenched, as they spoke of punishment. But then, Lyra stepped forward. For the first time, she raised her voice in the Grand Council chamber. "He saved my life," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "Again and again. When others laughed, when others hurt me, he stood. He is what your academy claims to teach: unity, courage, honor. If you punish him, then you prove the bullies right. You prove I do not belong." The chamber fell silent. Her words struck deep. She was no longer just a small, fragile girl. She was strong, shining with truth. And she had finally found her voice. The council could not ignore her. They relented. Roa and his group were punished, not as much as they deserved, but enough to stop their open attacks. Ethan was put on probation, watched carefully, but he did not care. None of it mattered compared to the look Lyra gave him afterward. Her smile was brighter than any star. Time moved on. The bullying did not vanish completely, but it lessened. With Ethan at her side, Lyra walked taller. She spoke in class. She even sang softly in the gardens, her voice carrying like music under the artificial sky. One evening, under the dome of stars, she asked Ethan, "Do you ever regret it? Fighting for me?" He shook his head. Not for a second. Her small hand brushed his, warm and gentle. "On my world," she whispered, "when someone protects you with their life, they are no longer a stranger. They are chosen family." The words struck deep. Ethan realized this was never just about a bullied alien girl or a reckless human boy. It was about something bigger. About standing against cruelty. about building bonds across the stars. Sometimes the smallest voices carried the greatest strength, and sometimes all it took was one human to say, "Leave the girl alone," and mean it. Life at the Galactic Academy slowly began to change. Lyra was no longer the silent shadow who kept her head down. With Ethan always nearby, she found the courage to lift her voice, even in small ways. She answered questions in class. She started joining group projects. Sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she sang in the gardens, soft songs from her home world, songs of loss and hope. The notes were haunting, yet beautiful, and even those who once mocked her stopped to listen in secret. Ethan noticed the change in her most of all. She stood straighter, walked with a little more confidence. But the cost was heavy. He still bore bruises from the fights. His name was whispered in the halls, half with respect, half with scorn. Some called him foolish for standing with her. Others, especially younger students from other species, looked at him with awe. They had seen something rare, a human willing to defend someone weaker, even when the whole academy stood against them. One night, Ethan found her sitting alone beneath the artificial star dome, staring upward as if searching for a place far away. He sat down beside her. "Thinking about home?" he asked quietly. Lyra nodded. "My home no longer exists. It was destroyed in war. I am the last envoy of my kind." Her voice shook, but she didn't look away from the stars. "Sometimes, I fear I will vanish too. Then nothing of my people will remain." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to say something comforting, but the truth was too big. Instead, he whispered, "As long as I'm here, you won't vanish. You're not alone anymore." She turned to him, her galaxy eyes glistening. "Not all humans are cruel," she said softly. "You are proof of that." Their bond grew deeper after that night. They trained together, studied together, and walked side by side through the academy halls. The bullying never fully disappeared, but it grew quieter. Roa and his friends still glared from the corners, but after the council's punishment, they no longer dared to attack openly. The tide had turned. Still, the academy was not safe. One day, during a field exercise outside the academy walls, an accident occurred. A transport malfunctioned, sparking a fire that spread quickly through the dry alien grasslands. Students panicked as the flames grew higher, choking the air with smoke. Amid the chaos, Lyra tripped, her small frame collapsing to the ground as fire closed in. "Lyra!" Ethan shouted, sprinting toward her. Without thinking of himself, he threw his body between her and the flames. He dragged her up, coughing as the heat licked at his skin. Together, they stumbled back toward the safe zone. When they finally crossed the boundary, medics rushed forward. Ethan collapsed, his uniform scorched, his hands blistered. Lyra fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. She pressed her glowing orb of healing light against his burns, whispering frantically, "Stay with me, stay with me." Warmth spread through him, easing the pain. His breathing steadied. Slowly, he opened his eyes. "Told you," he croaked with a weak smile. "Not for a second do I regret protecting you." Lyra sobbed, her tears falling like stars. Then she whispered words that shook him to his core. "On my world, when someone gives everything to protect you, they are not only family. They are soul-bonded. Forever." The words silenced the crowd of students who had gathered, watching. Some gasped. Others lowered their heads in respect. For the first time, many of them truly saw Lyra, not as a fragile alien girl, but as a survivor, as someone whose culture and heart were worth honoring. And they saw Ethan, not as a troublemaker, but as a human who embodied courage. From that day on, things shifted. Lyra was no longer bullied openly. More students began to sit with her, curious to learn about her world. Ethan became a quiet legend in the academy, not because he was the strongest fighter, but because he had been brave enough to say one simple thing: "Leave the girl alone." Years later, when they both stood together as representatives at a great interstellar council, Ethan remembered those first days. The laughter, the cruelty, the fear. And then he looked at Lyra, standing tall beside him, her silver hair glowing under the lights, her galaxy eyes steady with strength. She had once been a target. Now she was a voice for unity. And he had once been just another boy who stayed quiet. Now he was her chosen guardian. In the end, the story was simple. Sometimes, The smallest act of courage could change everything. Sometimes, all it took was one human to stand up and mean it when he said, "Leave the gal alone."